Good morning. So glad y'all are here and worship with us this morning. We're continuing this series that we started last week called People of Good News. And it's a little bit of a look just at us as a church and who we are and who we're trying to be and where we're going. We talk a lot around here. Our mission is to help people build their lives on the reality of Jesus. We do that by pursuing God, building community, and living generously. Last week, if you weren't with us, we talked about pursuing God and what that looks like for us as a church right now. We've had a really unique opportunity come for us, and we are pursuing a new campus a little further east of here in the Dune Lakes area that we're calling our Midtown campus that we're hoping to open this fall. And if you were not with us last week and you call Good News Homes, I don't say this very often, but I think it would be very helpful for you to jump online and go and watch last week's message just to get up to speed on everything that's happening out there and our hopes and plans for that, of where we feel like the Lord is leading us in that season. So pursue God. Today, we're talking about building community. I thought that video did such a great job of some people who have committed to being in this place, to calling it home, to showing up on a regular basis in the places they serve. It is a predetermined decision. And man, there is just fruit that comes out of that kind of a life. And so today, as we talk about this, pursue God, build community is what we're talking about today, okay? Now, you see this picture up here? This is me and some of my buddies fly fishing about a year and a half ago. Now, these guys are all friends of mine that have been friends since we were in junior high together. All of us ended up going into ministry together. One of them worked at Duke Seminary and is now a pastor of a local church in Raleigh-Durham. One of them is the campus pastor at the Wesley Foundation in Auburn, War Eagle, even though we lost yesterday. That's cool. And then the other one became an Anglican priest. And so we've kind of been together all through life, but we'd really, quite frankly, just drifted apart for no real intentional reason. And then one day, one of them was getting ordained about 2 years ago. And so we had all decided we were going to go to this ordination service. And after the dust had settled of everything, we ended up at a Waffle House late one night in Mobile, Alabama. And we were sitting there, and one of my friends at the table, he said, y'all, listen, he said, there is no way that I can go back in life and make friends for as long as I've been friends with y'all. And he's like, so like each other or dislike each other, we're all we've got. And he's like, we need to be more intentional about hanging out because we just can't replace this. And he said, so how about we get together once a month on Zoom, and every other year or so we catch up and make it a point to go travel, hang out together. And so we've been faithful to that over the last 2 years. And it's just been such a gift to have those relationships reignited that we've been able to be friends with over the long haul. There's just something different about relationships over time that aren't built on some sort of quid pro quo of what we can get in and out of it, but they're just simply people that just are in our lives, and we're going to love them because they are in our lives. Now, for a lot of us, when we look through the scriptures, one of the most overlooked miracles, I've heard this line a few times, I've said it a few times, but I think it's so true. People say one of the most overlooked miracles in all of the New Testament is that Jesus had 12 close friends in his 30s. I mean, it's wild, you can pull that off, right? Because we look at the world today and there's this sense of like, that almost feels miraculous. Right? We're so busy, but there are so many other things at play that create this disruption of long-term committed relationships. We say pursue God, build community. And the other way we like to talk about building community is that we say we want to be people who commit to real relationships. But what we find is there's sort of all these forces at play right now that are against us committing to real relationships. If you do a deep dive around the sociology of this right now, it's kind of wild, all the language that is coming to the surface, all the different things that are happening. I want to share a couple of them with you this morning. One, this idea of optionality. Okay, like modern life is continuously training us to keep our options open until the very last second. Okay, so this means like dating apps. This means Uber Eats, that you don't have to cook. You know, you just order it and it'll show up exactly what you want a few minutes later. To streaming services, you no longer have to wait until next Friday to watch the new episode. You can sit down and watch all 14 seasons tonight if you want to do that. You don't have to go to the video store, pick it out ahead of time. It's like, boom, it's right here. This is what I want. This is how I want it right now. And so if we have these ideas of optionality where we keep our options open to the very last minute in so many categories of life, it's a bit naive to think that that isn't somehow going to form us in a way that that spills over into our relationships with other people. And so we start to have that kind of approach to relationships where we're kind of in until the last minute, and then if we feel like it, we may or may not. And we feel that. And we feel that when we give invitations to people. And there's an anxiety that kind of wells up around all of that of like, are we going to be good enough when it comes down to the very last minute? I mean, how many of y'all in this room probably over the last month have had plans made for months that were bailed the day before? Right? It's just a very common occurrence in our world to live like this in so many different ways. Second thing I would say is this idea of flakiness sort of keeps bubbling up to the surface. Individualism has replaced communal obligation. So essentially, we do what's best for us, and that has replaced and become a higher value than keep your word. And as we see this, it starts to change in a lot of ways. Obligation is actually now framed as an unhealthy and oppressive thing instead of actually a high value of commitment. And technology makes it so much easier for us to be flaky and opt out, right? If you used to bail on plans, you had to like actually call them and lie to their face. Now you just get to send vague text shortly before. Hey, sorry, something came up, can't make it. And you're just done. And the optionality gets lived out. And then there's this challenge we live in this world where we see this term othering, right? And what that means is we live in this incredibly divided world in which mass media prints money off of creating enemies between us and creating former friends. When this gets deep in our soul, there is a real shift that can happen. And I would say, to just kind of put a broad umbrella over this, the shift that happens is we move from a relational default mode of charity and curiosity to judgment and suspicion. We don't walk into rooms saying, oh, look at all these wonderful people. I wonder what value they could add to my life, to like, well, what do they think about this? What do they think about that? And are they good enough to get into my circle? And do they, we start, and there's this shift that can happen if we're not careful. And there's this like deformation of the soul that starts to happen. A word for that sociologists use is fundamental attribution theory. And what that means is our fundamental attributions shift in our soul in the way that we respond to people and situations. And what it means is fundamentally we assume we're right and good, and fundamentally we assume they're wrong and bad. Example, I snapped because I'm exhausted. They snapped because they're a selfish jerk. I forgot because I've had a crazy week. They forgot because they're irresponsible and have been since they were 4 years old. I missed church because my schedule was packed. They skipped because they're heathens who don't love Jesus. Right? It's like for us, there's always a reason and it makes perfect sense. But for them, God. And if we just kind of let all of these little things build at us, eventually they form us in a way that our fundamental default mode is not charity, but it's suspicion. And we've missed this, and we've missed the beauty of the church when we move to this posture of suspicion over charity. Now we're going to look at a passage in Mark chapter 3 today. And what we're going to see in this principle at play in this passage today, I think if we can understand and overcome this, it could bring some major healing into our relationships and free us to commit more deeply to the relationships that matter most in our lives. So check this out, Mark chapter 3. It's a really short story. And what you have is Jesus in a synagogue with these religious leaders who are trying to bring him down. They're trying to discredit him. You would say they have a default of suspicion. Right? They have their understanding of how the world should work. They have their understanding of how religion works. They have their understanding of all of these things. Like there are rules to live by. They are very clear. They understand them. And Jesus is showing up to disrupt this in a big, big way. The other thing you got to know is when they gather in this little synagogue, one of the things that was a cultural custom is that there would be different seats given to different people based on their perceived value to the community. Okay, so if you're like wealthy, had it all together, like you get the front row, right? If you're struggling, if there's something unique about you, you end up towards the back. And so when we're in this moment, in this passage that we're stepping into, that is what we see at play. This is kind of the moment we're stepping into. So it's high pressure. There's a lot of intensity around this. There's all this cultural nuance at play, and it's really beautiful how Jesus handles this whole situation. Starts off, it says, another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Now, the shriveled hand what we can assume is that he was not in a seat of honor in this room. He would have been towards the back. These religious leaders would have been seated towards the front in this posture to kind of convey all of these unspoken things. And what happens is when we start to live like this, we may not operate like that in exactly the same way today, but for some of us, we sort of create this internal ability to do this on our own in real time. Like there's certain people that we'll sit by, there's certain people we don't want to sit by. And we sort of create this ideal of community, and we want to pursue that. And so we continually try to put ourselves in the place that allows us to get around the people that we think, if those people like us and we can like them, that all of a sudden we're going to solve something internally that really is not meant to be solved by other people, but is meant to be solved by the grace and the goodness of Jesus. There's this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He grew up Nazi Germany, pastoring, ended up dying in a concentration camp, wrote some beautiful, beautiful things. And he has this book on the idea of committing to real relationships. And he calls it Life Together. And I'm gonna quote it to you twice this morning, it's that good. This one's a little aggressive, so hang on, okay? He says this: Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies. At the end, all his disciples deserted him. On the cross, he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause, he had come to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian, too, belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. There is his commission, his work. The kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies. And he who will not suffer this does not want to be of the kingdom of Christ. He wants to be among friends, to sit among roses and lilies, not with the bad people, but with the devout people. Oh, you blasphemers and betrayers of Christ. If Christ had done what you are doing, who would ever have been spared? Happy Sunday. And those are aggressive words, but it's like right to the heart of this. Right? If it's just about building like a holy huddle where I don't have to like deal with any inconvenience, any relational friction at all, how do we ever expect to be formed in any meaningful way? Like if the fruit of the Spirit is what we're supposed to grow in, love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and goodness and self-control, right? We need to move into places where those muscles actually need to be flexed. And when we actually learn to flex those muscles in those kind of environments, we start to actually become what the scripture calls about light in the dark. We start to become people of grace who show up to bless and not to be served, but to serve. And so the passage continues on. That was just verse 1. There's like 9 more. Here we go, huh? Verse 2. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. There was this posture of heart for them that was not of charity, it was of suspicion and judgment. And they walked into the room looking to confirm what they already believed. They went into that room with purity tests abounding of, are they good enough to be in my circle? Are they worthy of being in this place? And it continues on, and it says, Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, stand up in front of everyone. And I think this is so great because Jesus is just kind of like, hey, yo, stand up. Everybody needs to look at you and see that like you're a real person. This isn't just theory. This isn't just like conceptual stuff. This isn't like where we can go into like kind of an ivory tower and talk about perfect ideals of how it all should be. This is like real person, real struggles, real challenges, real issues. You in the back, right? Like stand up. Don't really stand up from the back. Don't worry. That might have felt, some of you got a little anxious. He's like, really, like stand up. And they're sort of forced to face him. And Jesus is like, look at him. And then Jesus asked this question that seems so obvious, right? Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill? And he puts them in this like unique spot where it's like all of a sudden this idea of like, pushing them out. They're not worthy. They're not good enough. It doesn't work anymore when they have to look at him and actually answer that question. And it says, but they remained silent. They just believed that this ideal was more important than this person. And in verse 5, it says he looked around at them in anger. I think that's important. Just like feel that for a second. Like Jesus, like he's angry. Like the way this is playing out, these dynamics, the way they're judging, this posture of suspicion, this way of looking at each other as the enemy. Jesus was angered by it. He was deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And I think for a lot of us, the barrier to committing to real relationships is very bluntly our stubborn hearts. And we have this idea of what community is supposed to be. And so we want to pursue that at all costs. And we sort of start to deem ourselves worthy and unworthy of different people, of being able to be in our circle of influence. And then Jesus, looking at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, and this is like so genius what Jesus does here. It's just like brilliant. How even in the anger, even in the frustration, he rises above all of it. And what these folks are there to do is they're there to find him working on the Sabbath. And they are so literal about this like purity test. It was like if you just like lift your arm too high, it's like, whoop, that's work, right? And they're like calling him out. And so there's like really tight guidelines around what it means to work. And they're looking for him to break any of these in this heart and posture of suspicion. And so Jesus says to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretches it out, and his hand was completely restored. And Jesus is like, didn't work. Like, do you see the beauty and the brilliance in that? He's like, what are you gonna bust me for? I didn't do anything. He's like, just stick it out. He's like, phew. Jesus just rises all above it. He's like, there's such a better way here. It says, then the Pharisees went out, began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Right, their hearts are hardened even more. And as we look at this, this is a very, very real thing. And I think in the world we found ourselves in today, it is very important that we continue to have soft hearts that are willing to commit to real relationships where we have the ability to form other people around us and other people have the ability to speak life into us. Now, I want to talk just a couple quick thoughts about this for us this morning. Number one, and I think this is really fundamental to this whole thing. I'd take nothing else today, I'd take this away. Look at who is around, not who you wish was. And to just start there. Those dudes in the fishing pick, like they just are the ones that are there from middle school. Like they're just the ones there. The coach your kid has right now, that's just the one that's there. The teacher they have, that's just the one that's there. The kids in your class, in your grade at school right now that you wish you were in the other class, you wish you were in that group, it's like, well, these are the ones that are here. And what starts to happen is we get this posture of suspicion. We start to see that these people, if we could just get to the other side, like that would actually be better. That's really where it's at. I want to give you this other quote from that book with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He says this, the person who loves their dream of community will actually destroy community. But the person who loves those around them will begin to create community. So, I think it's the Doobie Brothers. Love the one you're with. Right? It's like, how do we learn to just like say like, who's right here? And like, how do we love those people that the Lord puts in front of us in this season? And so in this passage, the guy was right there, but they never saw him. They had this idealized image of who was allowed in their circle. And so because of that, it started to create these barriers, not this place of welcome. And this can be so hard to see in ourselves. The Great Commission, it says, therefore, at the end of Jesus' life, he's getting ready to go up into heaven, ascend, and he lays it all out, and he says to the disciples, he's like, listen, here's the game plan. He says, go and make disciples. Make disciples. And somehow I think in the church, we confuse that a little bit sometimes, and we think it's go and make friends. And like we just want people who just look like us, who live in our neighborhood, who have the same stage of life, their kids that hang out with our kids, so like we can like do a Bible study with them. Those are the people that count. Those are the ones that we'll let in. But what we actually see in this way of Jesus is that when we allow these other folks to step in, it can be really transformative. And that's where like the real growth is. That's where the real community is. That's where the real beauty begins to happen. And the Holy Spirit shows up and shapes and forms us in really distinct ways. And to help kind of like maybe just pound this in and help you see it a little clearer, I mean, think about every favorite TV show, generation for generation for generation. It is really like what we're drawn to in those TV shows is not a group of people who all look, act, talk the exact same way, live in the same neighborhood, are the same age, and whose kids are the same age. It's actually like the community that we watch over and over and over again and find such enjoyment is actually a community full of a lot of different people. All right, I'm gonna throw a bone to some of you older folks. Show MASH, right? It ain't MASH without Klinger and Hawkeye, right? It's like that's the beauty of it. For you Friends fans, like you pull a weird Phoebe and weird Joey out of it, and it's like, it's not the same thing. If you like Seinfeld, right? Kramer and Newman. It's like, that's what makes it what the beautiful community is that so many people are drawn to. Imagine The Office without Dwight and Creed, right? It's like you need those kind of characters. And what is Parks and Rec without Ron Swanson? Right? It's like those characters, when it's all these people from all these places who have to figure it out, is what we watch and look at and feel like, man, this is beautiful. Like, this is what we want to feel in our own lives. And I'll tell you, we have somebody who's a part of our church who I think embodies this as well as anybody I've ever seen. Some of you know Patrick and his wife, Carrie. They own a little restaurant up here called South of Philly. And if you've ever been into South of Philly, it's really fascinating. It's like, to quote old TV shows, it's like the Max from Saved by the Bell. It's like where everybody goes to hang out. And you walk into this place, and it is just people from all walks of life, all different places. They come in there because there is this real profound sense of community that you can just feel in the air. Sometimes you go over there for lunch, and you will literally have, the line will be out the door, almost to the parking lot, and there's no tables to sit in because so many people are showing up there. And one of these days, I was in there, the line was out the door. It was just crazy busy, people everywhere. Patrick, who owns it, he goes to church here with us. He's running around with his rag and his spray bottle, like kind of just trying to keep up and do all things. And I was like, Patrick, come here. And I just kind of like stopped him in the middle of it, and I could tell he was kind of annoyed. And I was like, hey, bud, I was like, real quick. I said, all these people in here. I said, how many, I mean, it's just everybody. It's like the whole town, all these different people in there. And I said, how many of these people do you know their names? And he looked around, and he started looking around. And he's got his rags, spray bottle thing, and he goes, every single one of them. And then he just bolted back to the kitchen. And as I look at that, I'm like, it's because he cares about who the Lord puts in his path. He's not like recruiting people and saying, you got to look like this, you got to be like this. He's like, you come through these doors, I'm going to love you, you are welcome, and we're going to move into relationship. And man, there's just something so magnetic about that way of life. And my hope and my prayers for us as people of good news is that our church would function like that, and we would be those kind of people. Now, I am going to take a hard left turn here in this sermon for a minute, okay? We're in this series called People of Good News. And I want to talk a few things about the macro church for us, like a little bit of culture. I hope this is the kind of people we become. But I also think it's important that we live and become and be that kind of people. So point 2 in this, I would say, is that we need to be people who live under authority. Okay? And I'll say that for you, just really quick bullet point. Like, who are the people in your life that actually have permission to speak truth to you? For you to say, you know what, I want to live this way of Jesus. And when I get outside of the bounds, like, you have permission to speak that to me. Okay, so that's the whole point there for that for you. But I want to step back up and kind of look at this from a macro sense real quick as we take these few weeks to talk about where we are in the life of our church. I think this is important personally, but I also think it's important corporately. Now, if you ever fill out one of those cards on the seat back in front of you, if you're new at this, and put your information on there, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get invited to what we call our New to Good News dinner. And that's a little dinner. I go there, we host it. It's a great night. We talk about the past, the present, and the future of good news, and we always end with a time of Q&A. And one of the questions that always gets asked to us is, tell us about like your denomination. Like what, hard left turn, remember me telling you that? They said, tell us about like your denomination. And so we'll have a little conversation about that. And I think it's kind of time for us to have a little conversation about that right now. So a few years ago, we left the United Methodist Church for a variety of reasons. But in the time of leaving that, I think another question for us is, so what do we do next? And so through a lot of discernment with our leadership at the time, we found ourselves becoming a part of a community called the Free Methodist Church. Now, what we did, if you were ever in a relationship that ended suddenly, that you'd been in for a long time, I would give you advice to not go get remarried next month, okay? And so we felt like that was wise for us as a church as well. So we set up an agreement with the Free Methodist Church where we said for 3 years, we are going to act like we're fully committed to one another, and we're going to live in this, and then we're going to keep assessing this. And at the end of 3 years, we're going to step back and say, do we feel like this is the right relationship for us as a church and then for them as a denomination? And so this spring, we're coming up to the 3-year end of that. So if anything about this denomination or hearing this makes you anxious, just know it's what we've been doing for 3 years, okay? So it shouldn't be anything that's going to be different. You're not going to feel anything different. It's going to be the same deal of who we are. But I think it's really important for us individually to commit to real relationships. And I also think it's really important, and I think I know our leadership also thinks it's very important for us corporately to commit to real relationships. Now, here's some of the value of that and why I see this as so important. I want to give you first a little bit of background of the Free Methodist Church. It has been around since 1860, and it is called Free for a variety of reasons. It was founded in 1860, right before the Civil War, and these Methodists believed that slavery was a clear contradiction of the gospel. And so this word resonated, it moved forward. There was a habit of churches in those times to sell seats in order to build the church buildings. And obviously the most wealthy got the best seat, and it kind of harkens back to our story from Mark chapter 3 today. And they said, we will have none of that in our churches. And they said that grace could not be purchased, neither can these seats. They were free to follow the Spirit of God. They pushed back hard against rigid, status-driven religion. They believed in the free grace of God for all, that God's grace is offered to everyone, and that salvation is not just reserved for a select group of people, but that people are genuinely free to respond to God's grace. They believed in freedom from sin, and that not just freedom from sins, but freedom from sin, not just from forgiveness, but from the freedom from the power of sin in our lives, and that real transformation and change is possible. Free Methodists are free because they believe the gospel brings freedom from sin, from injustice, from spiritual elitism, and from anything that keeps the people of God from fully living in God's grace. And so if you were to jump on the Free Methodist Church website today, you would see something called the Free Methodist Way. And it's what they talk about is an identity that they hope all of the Free Methodist churches that we hope we have together as a body. We say we are about life-giving holiness. That means the gospel actually changes the way we live our lives. It means we're called to a different way of life, a different standard, to be set apart, and that holiness actually changes the way that we live. It's about love-driven justice, and that we pursue good in all ways for all people. It's about Christ-compelled multiplication. I love it. They're like, growth is expected, right? If we're doing the right things the way that we're supposed to do those, we want to see fruitful ministry happening. It's a big part of us being able to go to our Midtown campus. Number 4, cross-cultural collaboration. The whole Bible for the whole world, working together to spread the gospel. Heaven is going to be every tribe, tongue, and nation, and so should the local church, as it reflects God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. And then finally, God-given revelation. It means we hold unwaveringly to our conviction that the Bible is the inspired word of God and our final authority in all matters of faith and practice. Now, as we look through this, a few things that I think are just some really important points of why I think it's important for the local church to commit to real relationships at a larger level. 1, theological stability. If I get up here and start saying crazy stuff, I have a bishop and superintendent who you can call to get involved with it. There's real layers of accountability. It's not just my friends and people that I know that are on our board, but there's real layers of accountability. There's pastoral preparation. There are things that I'm held accountable to, our ordained clergy that are held accountable to, from education to character development that is supervised in a very real way. We have ordination standards that make sure I'm accountable to people other than just those who are here locally, along with all of the other pastors on our staff. Being a part of this larger body gives us a safety net of trusted and tested leaders when crisis hits, who do these kind of things for a living. They help us create guardrails around pastoral integrity, around the safety of our children's ministry, around our financial processes, and around local church structure and health. The other piece of it is it gives us family in all of the best ways. Right? It means we're a part of a much larger body of believers and churches that is a global body of people all over the world. We are a part of a subgroup within the Free Methodist Church that is called the Reach Conference. If you just Google the Reach Conference, you'll see some of these sister churches of us that are in this process. Those are a group of 7 churches. I meet with those pastors pretty regularly. They speak into the life of our church. We speak into the life of their church. They actually, 2 of those pastors preached last summer while I was on sabbatical, and were here with us as a part of that. We get to live in the reality of family and how we live into this. So, if you have any questions about that, I'm always great to talk about that. You're going to be hearing a little bit more information about that as we move closer to the spring, where we're actually going to have a church vote about that decision and making that next step forward. So you'll hear more about that. But I just wanted to take a quick minute and just say to you this morning of like, I think this is really important that we're a part of something that is much bigger than ourselves in a lot of different ways. I think that's important for us personally, that we commit to real relationships. It's also important that corporately we commit to real relationships. All right, last point. Say yes. Like, just say yes. Like, say yes to the people in front of you. And when people invite you in, say yes to showing up in places. I have a good friend that has a great little metric for his life. He calls it the couch quotient. He says, how many couches that are not mine have I sat on over the last couple weeks? Like, do we live in this kind of isolated world, or are we saying yes to the people that invite us into life around us? Culture says be true to how you feel. It says optionalization. It says, be able to defer till the last minute, all of those things. Scripture says let your yes be yes, your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. And so for us today, a couple things. One, the most important relationship that we need to commit to is our relationship with Jesus. And he invites us into that freely. There is no inner circle in that. We are all God's people. We are welcome into this place. Jesus did not die for an idealized version of you, waiting for you to get your act together. He is not flaky. He is not going to optionalize you. He is more committed and more holy to you than you could ever imagine. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And for some of us, we want to live and just sort of keep these options open, and we'll take a little Jesus when it's convenient, but Jesus wants all of us. And when we commit to that real relationship, there is a profound transformation that happens within us. And then the second thing that I want to invite you into this morning, we're going to wrap up with this, is I showed you that picture of my buddies from middle school, fishing, hanging out, all those kind of things. Sure, we've had bumps along the way and we've had different things. But as a pastor over these last 5 years or so, I've seen more and more relational division from people who used to be really close and really tight and no longer talk to one another for a variety of reasons. There's a great quote, sometimes attributed to a guy named John Wesley, that says, on essentials we seek unity, on non-essentials we seek liberty, in all things we seek charity. And I think for some of us, relationally, we have held people to really weird standards where we have majored on the minors. And we have allowed real disruption. We have allowed evil to disrupt families, to disrupt friendships that have been around for your whole life, that have disrupted church relationships with people. And the reality is if we're going to be the people of God who bear the fruit of the Spirit, of love, of joy, of peace, of patience, of kindness, of gentleness, of goodness, of self-control, of all of these kind of things, if we want to be the people who work and live as reconcilers, as people who bring peace into this world, in those relationships, somebody's got to go first. And my hope is that we as the people of God would be the kind of people who are willing to seek peace, who are willing to grow around the difficult edges of the people in our lives, and to not try to isolate to just get a group of people who look, talk, dress like me, shop where I shop, eat where I eat, do all the things the way I do them. And if we can just get that, it's all gonna be perfect. But that we could learn to love the ones that the Lord's put in front of us. And church, my hope and my prayer is that we would be people who lead in this, that we'd be people who commit to real relationships, that we value them, and that we are people who, I say this at the end of almost every service, that we would be people who are known by our love. In the way that we love, in the way that we interact with those around us. And so today, my prayer is that the Lord would convict us where we need convicted. What does it look like to love the ones you're with? The family, the people, the teachers, the coaches, the classmates, the friends, the coworkers. And to stop chasing this idealized version of something that is really just us with a God complex trying to control everything, but learning what it means to be God's people in the places we are sent, to be light in the dark, to bring joy and to bring peace and to bring hope and to bring the forgiveness and the grace of God into every room and situation and relationship that we step into. And so I pray this morning we'd reflect deeply on that, on what that means, what that looks like in our life. And I'm gonna pray this prayer often. I'm gonna close by praying it over us today, that the Lord would convict us where we need to be convicted, and that the Lord would call us where we need to be called, and that we as God's people would have the strength to go into those places. Amen? Let me pray for us. Jesus, be with us this morning. Convict us where we need convicted. Call us where we need called. And as we sing these words about building our life, I pray, Lord, that you would open our eyes to the places where we need to love and serve in new and fresh ways. Maybe some places where we need to go first. Some places where we need to open our eyes to the people that are right around us and to love them well this morning. So be with us, Jesus. Amen.